What happened with open world racers on handhelds? A lot of people say things about what the Switch, quote unquote, can handle, but way back on the PSP, we had multiple Need for Speed entries that were open world. Midnight Club, LA Rush, Test Drive Unlimited, but then the Vita and 3DS came along and almost nothing came, and even the Switch only has a couple. But the Vita did have a particularly good game from the Need for Speed franchise that was almost perfectly one-to-one with its PS3 counterpart, and featured quite possibly the funniest Western showdown to goofy street racing TV commercial I've seen. Continuing our 10th anniversary throwbacks, here is my review of Need for Speed Most Wanted for the PS Vita and PlayStation TV. With story, there's really not much here. You get a little intro at the beginning detailing the city of Fairhaven as the biggest place for street racing on the planet, and you're a racer trying to earn reputation and become Fairhaven's most wanted driver. And while that is all the story you get, the intro has a lot of charm. From butterflies and hurricanes playing in the background to just how the dialogue and cinematics go with setting up the city as well as the vehicles, it just feels fun. With gameplay, this is a 3D open world racing game with light customization elements. As you play, you'll traverse a large open world and find events in order to up your reputation and take down other racers. Or, find a police officer so you can mess with them and start a cop chase. Now first of all, the Vita version of Most Wanted 2012 is almost one-to-one with the PS3 version. Traffic on the Vita is a bit lighter and it's only got 4 player options for multiplayer, which isn't really a thing anymore. Though the biggest difference is the Vita didn't get any of the DLC packs for special upgrades in vehicles. That was made exclusive for the other platforms. And going back to multiplayer, it's not really available anymore. Every time I attempt to connect on the Vita, it just kicks back with a failed response. Unfortunately, this means the multiplayer exclusive vehicles like the Ford Focus ST is no longer available in the Vita version, as that car could only be used in a multiplayer session. But single player is still available, and that's where a lot of the fun is. This game is very simple, I'd say. You're set down on a large open world map and your goal is to find cars and do races to upgrade them. You don't have a money or currency system, so you don't have to grind to purchase vehicles. It's simply a matter of exploration. Most of the vehicles are just sitting around the map somewhere. As the game's intro says, if you can find them, you can drive them. You just pull up next to a vehicle, tap triangle, and boom, the vehicle's unlocked and ready to go. And that is the beauty of this game for those players that like exploring open world maps. Outside of the vehicles the Most Wanted racers drive, you can unlock the entire roster of cars just by exploring the map and not doing a single race. Plus, we have those Criterion extra features built in here, like smashing security gates, billboards, and of course, starting long, epic cop chases around the city. But let's go back to the roster. This game includes over 60 different vehicles, including a lot of new and old, from the iconic 2006 Ford GT to the Tesla Roadster, the first vehicle the company ever made that had only been available for a few years by the time this game was made back in 2011 and 2012. And these vehicles are where the racing happens. Unlike other games of the genre, events are tied to the cars themselves. Each vehicle has about half a dozen races available, each catered towards that vehicle, and nets you upgrades upon victory, like nitrous, tires, and armor. Technically, you can use whatever car you like for the Most Wanted drivers, but all the other races are locked to vehicles. Speaking of, let's talk about racing and specifically the handling. Most Wanted 2012 feels a little clunky at times with steering, though it doesn't take too long to get used to it. It relies heavily on its drift mechanic with normal braking, which admittedly is probably the easiest drift system in the series to learn. Just a little tap on the brake and a little input from the left analog stick and you're pretty much a drift master. And the simplicity of the simple drifting, basic customization, and no currency system, and just casually driving around to find and unlock everything is something that a lot of longtime series fans don't like. But I've always loved the freedom in not having to grind for money to buy cars. Now, as far as content and length goes, you can spend a lot of time here. I normally spend maybe half a dozen hours in this game just exploring and doing cop chases to unlock a ton of the roster without touching a single Most Wanted race. But if you want to go for progression, it'll probably take you about 10 to 12 hours to clear the game, while unlocking everything will easily be twice that. Next up is presentation, and this is very of its age and dependent on how you play this game. Visually, the game looks pretty good for a Vita racing game. It does have a lot of little jagged edges around the environments and the vehicles, but they're hidden very well with the Vita's smaller 5-inch screen. Though if you use a PlayStation TV, all those blemishes become very apparent. It's pretty crazy just how many jaggies you notice on a small TV like my 24-inch. It still looks okay for a Vita era racer and leagues ahead of the PSP's racing games, but it's definitely something you're going to want to play on a Vita rather than a PlayStation TV. Now as far as performance goes, it's pretty decent. The game sticks to 30 FPS for most of the game, sometimes dipping into the 20s in the middle of racing. Though with where it drops, I normally don't really notice it, and it doesn't cause issues for those races. And just FYI, the PS3 and 360 versions of this game were also locked to 30 FPS, meaning the Vita's performance is just under those bigger consoles. Though I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's the best place to play this game on a handheld. Of course, now in 2023, the Steam Deck can play the PC version with all DLC available, buttery smooth and detailed car models, and a never-ending 60 FPS. But for what this game was at original launch, a Vita racing game tackling the same open world the PS3 used almost half a decade before PC handhelds were a thing, it's pretty good. Now, before we conclude, why did I choose this game for my 10th anniversary throwback reviews? Not only have I played through this game probably a dozen times over across Vita and Steam, but this was a fantastic open world racing game that showed the Vita could still do what the PS3 could, albeit with downgraded visuals. Plus, it was when EA was still providing console level support for handhelds, especially compared to this game's iOS port that looked and played like a fine mobile racing game, but it was turned into a linear circuit racer that had very simplistic controls, no open world, and just didn't feel like the same game. In conclusion, Most Wanted 2012 brought the Vita a great open world racer that had nearly all the content of its PS3 counterpart and looked great and fun on the go. Now on the downside, the multiplayer seems to be gone now, the Vita didn't get any of the DLC, and the visuals don't look great on the PSTV. But if you want to play this on the Vita's smaller handheld screen, it looks good and is still a load of fun to drive around and mess with the cops. PS Vita Reviews rates Need for Speed Most Wanted for the PS Vita and PlayStation TV a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.